solving mysteries in the night. Chasing shadows, finding answers, shining bright light. No one's left behind in the darkness, all alone. With a heart like a siren, she brings the lost ones home. Silent cries in the dark no longer have to be, for justice wheels keep turning, Granny on the beat. Broken voices find their power, call out hope again. When Granny's crime busters run, no victims left in pain. Bravery in her veins, truth she won't disguise. With a fire in her eyes, she's got nothing to deny. Granny fights for justice, never backs down from the call. For the voiceless and the missing, she'll stand tall. In a world full of shadows, she fights the unseen, a guardian of the truth in this wicked dream. And every story told brings her back to life. Granny's on the case, cutting through the lies. She guards the broken hearted from the world that hides. With unwavering spirit, she wears no disguise. Searching for the lost pieces of a shattered life. Granny brings the dawn after a longest night. Oh.
Hello, everyone. Come on in, take a seat, grab a beverage. Today we are going over a new ruling in the Lindsay Clancy case. This case is so disheartening. This is Lindsay, okay? And this was her 3 children and her husband, okay? It's another picture of her, and those are her 3 children. So basically, Lindsay was a mother from Massachusetts, Duxbury. She was accused of red rumming her children in January of 2023. Her trial is scheduled to begin January 5th, 2026, 3 years later, guys. She has pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of red rum and strangulation of her 3 children, 5-year-old Cora Clancy, 3-year-old Dawson Clancy, and 8-month-old Callan Clancy. Her Brockton-based defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, is pursuing an insanity defense, according to the notion he filed in court. Reddington said she had postpartum depression and was over-medicated at the time of her children's deaths. So that's where they're going now. Clancy is being held at Tewksbury Hospital for court-ordered medical treatment. She was paralyzed from the waist down since the accident, or since the tragedy of taking her children's lives. What happened, she sent her husband for some medication for one of the children, the little girl, and asked him to get takeout. She went downstairs, used an elastic band, like from when you're trying to work out, around each of the children's necks, and then proceeded to slit her wrists. And I guess when that didn't work, she threw herself out the second-story window. And her husband came home, found her first. She told him, the children are downstairs. He went, found them all. The baby, the 8-month-old, lived for 3 days and then passed away. So all 3 kids are gone. In an interview with The New Yorker, Patrick Clancy expressed forgiveness and sympathy for his wife. He said, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." While he did not comment on his marital status, he continued to refer to her as his wife. So we don't know if they're still together, just what, but I did want to play a clip. It's about 20 minutes long, kind of talks about the new ruling from the judge, because we will follow this trial. This was Lindsay in the hospital right after it happened. She had had severe postpartum depression. She had been to doctors. She was on 13 medications, guys, at the time of this tragedy. Before this, I do want to say Lindsay was known to be a wonderful mother, very attentive, very loving, wonderful mother, wonderful wife, just a loving woman until she got postpartum depression. And she had been seeking treatment for this depression, right? Was put on 13 different medications. So let's go ahead and listen to, sorry, I have to share my screen with you first.
A major update in the Lindsay Clancy case out of Massachusetts. The judge has now ruled the New Yorker must hand over all of its research on the case. That's things like texts, emails, voicemails, and recordings collected when Patrick Clancy gave an exclusive interview last year. The interview was all about Lindsay Clancy and the couple's 3 young children, who Lindsay is now accused of murdering. The case made national headlines back in January of 2023 when Patrick Clancy came home to find a devastating scene. All 3 of his children were dead and his wife had attempted suicide. This happened in Duxbury, Massachusetts. It's a coastal city south of Boston, and it's where the Clancy family lived, home to parents Patrick and Lindsay and their 3 children, 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan. Pictures show a happy family, but off camera, Lindsay was allegedly struggling with her mental health. In the months leading up to the children's deaths, Lindsay was in and out of treatment centers, shuffled between doctors. In the span of just 4 months, Lindsay was prescribed and started taking 13 different medications, all to help with anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideations. All of this info is coming from Patrick Clancy himself, who explained everything in a New Yorker article published last October. It's titled, "A Husband in the Aftermath of His Wife's Unfathomable Act." Patrick Clancy's wife killed their children during a postpartum mental health crisis. Prosecutors describe a clear-headed scheme, but Clancy says, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." Right from the subhead of this article, author Erin Orby lays out the prosecution's side of things, that Lindsay Clancy knowingly murdered her 3 children and was sane at the time. Prosecutors charged Lindsay with 3 counts of murder, outlining what they say was premeditation leading up to these tragic events. The morning of January 24th, 2023, Lindsay took her daughter Cora to the doctor. Prosecutors argue there were no issues getting to the doctor or home and that Lindsay interacted normally with everyone there, so she was in the right mind. But in that New Yorker article, Patrick pushed back on all of this. The article reads, quote, The fact that she could bring her daughter to a medical appointment in the morning has been cited as evidence of her mental acuity. But Pat told me it wasn't an ordinary checkup. Cora had a stomach ache, and Lindsay had become fixated on the idea that something could be wrong with her liver. Pat had hoped that a visit to the pediatrician would bring Lindsay back to reality. Later in the day, Lindsay asked Patrick to run a few errands, to pick up some medicine for Cora at CVS, and then grab some takeout that would be the family's dinner. Prosecutors point to all of this too. At 4:13 p.m., Lindsay searched the restaurant's name, and right after that, she pulled up Apple Maps to determine how long it would take to get from their home in Duxbury to the restaurant. Prosecutors say Lindsay timed out all of this to make sure that Patrick was out of the house when she killed the children. But here's how Patrick replied in that New Yorker article, quote, "I think one of the first things I asked was, did you plan this? Is that why you sent me out?" he recalled. She said, "No, it was just like a snap of the fingers." Pat asked why she'd looked up how long it would take him to pick up their dinner, and Lindsay explained that she'd been concerned about getting him stuck in rush hour traffic. Then I said, "Did you Google ways to kill?" And she said, "Yeah, for myself, because I was suicidal for 2 months." Prosecutors disagree with all of this. They say those Google searches are incriminating and show Lindsay had intent to kill her children. After picking up the dinner that evening, Patrick headed back home where he arrived to this tragic scene. Lindsay was outside. She'd cut her wrists and neck and jumped from an upstairs window attempting suicide. In the basement of the home, Patrick found all 3 kids with exercise bands still around their necks. Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead almost right away, but Callan died 3 days later. Lindsay was paralyzed from the waist down due to this fall. She was taken to a hospital that day, and she's been there ever since. An image of Lindsay in her hospital bed has now become synonymous with the case, showing her just days after the killings. According to that New Yorker article, Patrick says he spoke to Lindsay around the same time frame. The article reads, quote, "Speaking at a quick, panicked clip, Lindsay explained that she'd heard a voice commanding her to kill the children and then herself because it was her last chance. Pat told me she did not sound like my wife. He ended the call after about a minute." In a different instance, Patrick talks about this too, quote, "I think it's a lot more hurtful if she did plan it and tricked me into believing she was having a great day. Pat told me one of the last times we spoke." He went on, I don't know who to believe, but I don't think it matters, really." According to the article, Patrick says he relives that day, wondering what if he went to the basement first instead of first going to Lindsay outside. But in looking back, there really weren't any warning signs. Here's another excerpt from that article, quote, "But he said that day seemed like a really good one. I mentioned that the same is often said before suicides. A sense of peace can set in when someone in despair decides to end things. So what do?" Pat asked, sounding offended, then genuinely uncertain. "Somebody's having a great day. Should I call the hotline?" Just after the killings, Patrick made a public statement on a GoFundMe page that has since raised more than $1 million. He wrote in part, quote, "I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. The real Lindsay was generously loving and caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace." In the days following the killings, the topic of Lindsay's mental health status came to the forefront. Her defense team has highlighted all of this too, saying she was over-medicated at the time of the killings and was suffering from postpartum depression and maybe even postpartum psychosis. Meanwhile, there have been some movements in the case. Just this week, a Massachusetts judge ordered the New Yorker to hand over all the info that was collected for the article with Patrick's interview. On February 10th, a summons was issued for Condé Nast. That's the New Yorker's publisher. A judge ruled that they must provide all audio recordings, notes, text messages, voicemails, and emails that were used in preparation for the article. That includes all the information from Patrick Clancy's interviews, but also the interviews of 2 of his family members and friends who were featured in the article as well. All right, we've kind of gone through everything we know so far, but I want to dig a little bit deeper. And for that, we're going to bring on legal analyst and attorney Dina Sy.
So, guys, before we get into that, I just wanted to stop and say, this article, you can go to the New Yorker. I tried to go there today. You have to pay if you want to see the article, obviously. I didn't do it because I know enough about this case that I didn't feel it was important, and they kind of go through the article with you. I think it's incredible that Patrick Clancy, her husband, finds the strength to forgive her. He's lost 3 children and his wife, in essence, because he knows he's never going to probably be able to live with her again, right? She's going to be, at the very least, in a mental institution. She is paralyzed from the waist down. So she'd be probably in a nursing home or something, right? I don't know if they'd bring her home for that. I don't know what his thoughts are. I have no idea what he does plan on doing if she does get out. I don't know. The searches don't help her case. You know, but I agree with him in the fact that she was mentally ill at the time that she did this. There is plenty to back that up. She was on psychotic medication. She was seeing therapists. She was seeing doctors. The whole thing, right? So, I agree with him that she was not mentally stable at the time that this occurred. Should she get off for breadrumming her children? No. I've always said that I don't think there's ever an excuse for red rum, right? It doesn't matter what it is, right? I will say, though, that I think that this is a case where the insanity plea does fit. I am not one that likes to see that happen very often, but I do see it in this case because she turned from a loving mother and wife to having a psychosis that was off the charts, right? And so, in my opinion, I feel the insanity is absolutely correct in this case. Does it mean she'll get off? No. She will probably spend the rest of her life in a mental institution. Guys, remember, if they get her meds sorted out, think about it. She didn't plan to live. And now, on top of it, she's paralyzed. I'm sure that she still doesn't want to live after this. I don't know how she's feeling now. But you know what I'm saying? I think that that's a long, rough road ahead of her mentally. Physically, she'll never walk again, right? So she'll always be in a hospital, right? And I hope that Patrick can move on with his life at some point, but he won't until after this trial is all done. And I don't know. Is he going to stand by her? I'm not sure, right? I don't know. When she comes face to face, when she starts getting healthy, she's got to live with what she's done for the rest of her life. So this is a tragic, tragic situation. 3 little children lost their lives. And they were so cute, weren't they? Lost their lives, aren't able to live, to grow up, to be productive members of society. And her life's pretty much, I I don't know if I'd want to live like she has to live now, right? I don't know if I could do that. I'm not saying I would commit suicide because I don't believe in it, but that's my opinion. but it would be very difficult to live that like that, right? And some may say she deserves it, and rightfully so. But I do think the medical component in this case is huge, very huge. Let's continue.
Doll. Dina, thank you so much for coming on with us today. Let's start with the newest information we have, which is a judge recently ordered the New Yorker to turn over all of its info about this case in regards to an exclusive interview over to prosecutors in Massachusetts. What do you make of that order?
Well, there are some protections in our country regarding forcing a publication or reporter to turn over unpublished material, which it sounds like this is what they want, is unpublished material. We have things called shield laws. New York is one of the states that has shield laws, which protect the reporter, because of the freedom of the press, the constitutional rights to freedom of the press of both the reporter and the newspaper. And so in order for them to kind of overcome, let's say, that shield law, the government has to show that, one, the information they're requesting is highly relevant to the criminal proceedings, that two, that the government has a compelling and overriding interest in the material, and that three, and this is the kind of the key, I think, on this one, is that the information cannot be obtained by some other means, which is interesting because they're really looking for the unpublished material having to do with the interview of the husband. So really, they're going to have to show why they can't get that information from just interviewing the husband himself. He's still available. Is he no longer wanting to become a witness? I mean, are they trying to subpoena him? Is he asserting now some sort of spousal privilege? They have to show something like that, because otherwise, even if they're saying this is important and compelling and we need this information, the husband's still out there. And, here he was talking to the press pretty freely. Why isn't he just talking to the government?
Which is interesting because in that article, it specifically says Patrick Clancy is ready to testify. He's willing to testify, speak with both sides. So is that what Condé Nast, the New Yorker, is going to come back with and say, hey, he says he wants to testify. Why do you need all this info?
It's exactly what they're going to say. And it's a really strong argument because this is part of how we have a free press, is that they can have confidential sources, unpublished material. They have their own protections. It is part of the Constitution, their own protections. And there is these overriding, there's the shield law allows for the fact that sometimes that can be pierced, let's say. But in this case, especially to your point where they say that he's willing to testify, I don't see any reason why they should have to hand over that material when you have this witness who's willing to talk to you.
Did you think it was something in the article itself that got them thinking, okay, we actually really want all of these notes, we want the recordings, we want all of that stuff, that maybe there was some new bombshell or nugget of information that they were hoping to learn more about?
But then you do have to beg the question, why wouldn't you just ask him? It could be just they're trying to be very broad. Like they know they're going to fail in court, but we're going to ask anyway. We want to, not leave any stone unturned, so to speak. And so we're going to ask everybody, or he's becoming a more difficult witness. And they're saying they look forward to him testifying in court publicly. But who knows? Maybe behind the scenes, they're starting to get worried about him testifying. It's one of the two. They, for some reason, either are starting to get concerned about him testifying so openly, and they thought he was more open, let's say, in that article, or they are just, they're reaching.
Which is fair and perhaps possible in that this came out in October of 2024. A lot of interviews were conducted before that. We're now into 2025, midway through February. So he could have changed his mind. That is very possible. I'm wondering about the other people who were mentioned in the article too. We're talking about Patrick Clancy's parents. There were also other relatives, I believe a cousin and some friends who were all interviewed, and their names are listed throughout this article. Do you think the prosecutors would hope to speak to all all of those people too? I know, again, they're asking for the notes and the recordings, but wouldn't they want to speak to these people maybe on a video recording of their own to ask specific questions?
Absolutely. In order to be able to really present it as evidence, they're going to want them to come and testify, which they have subpoena power. They can, even if these relatives don't want to talk, they can go and subpoena these witnesses and get them. They're not going to have spousal privileges like that husband could potentially assert. These other relatives are definitely fair game. And if anything, the interview kind of did half the battle for them, right? They did some searching for witnesses, and now they have a list of them and just made the job easier for the prosecution.
And a lot of what we're talking about today is the stuff that was behind the scenes. So nothing that was published. I mean, we're talking text messages or emails that were not included in the specific interview. But as far as the interview, it's public. I mean, if you have a login, you can read the New Yorker article yourself. Anyone can. So for that specific part of it, the article, do you think prosecutors would highlight that if they aren't bringing up specific interviews with all of these people, but they could just pull directly from the article itself?
Well, that's where you start to get into hearsay, which is out of court statements. So a lot of that is probably not the article itself. There's no reason probably for that to come in as evidence, because the best evidence is that person actually testifying in court. And if they're available, which it sounds like all these people really are, then they're not going to be able to get that interview in. But who knows? Like maybe if there's some sort of spousal privilege he asserts, I mean, that's going to get kind of battled through the courts. But an interview is, when people are available, is not going to, pass that hearsay rule.
Something you have brought up throughout this entire interview is spousal privilege, which I actually haven't talked much about with you in the past. So I wanted to bring that up right now. Patrick Clancy is a major witness for this case because he was the first one to the crime scene. He found not only his wife, but the 3 children in the basement. So he's a major witness in all of this. He's the one who called 911. Of course, prosecutors are going to want to talk to him. But what would this spousal privilege thing mean, that he wouldn't have to testify?
Mm-hmm. Yes, right. Exactly. At least to matters that she said to him. He might still be able to testify to things more contextually, let's say, about his relationship with his children, right? Or other situations like that. But we have certain kind of privileges in this country, such as the attorney-client privilege. What you say to your attorney, the attorney can't testify to that, right? There's a few exceptions, of course, if you're talking about like committing future crimes or whatever. Same with a therapist, right? There's a privilege there. And so we as a society have determined that conversations between spouses should have that level of protection, that somebody shouldn't be worried about talking to their spouse and then that person's going to have to testify against them. It's a way of protecting that relationship, let's say, in the way they protect the attorney-client or the therapist. So anything that she says to him, he can assert a spousal privilege and not testify. He can waive it, but he can decide not to testify.
So a through line we've been talking about throughout all of this is the fact that it seems as of right now that Patrick Clancy does want to testify. And if you go through and read this article, it seems like obviously he's going through a lot of struggles. There are issues following all of this. I'm sure he's mourning. I mean, it's a devastating thing altogether, but it does seem like he's backing up Lindsay, his wife, in the fact that she may have been going through a mental health crisis or postpartum psychosis. If that's the case, I'm wondering if the prosecution, why they would want to talk to him so much, because he might help the defense a bit, given the fact that they've pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. He's going to be a complicated witness because he has said, publicly that he does support her. He said, I didn't marry a monster. Like, she was sick, which is exactly what she's claiming. So it is definitely going to cut both ways. He's going to be an important witness in terms of, laying out the facts of the case and that it did indeed happen, right? That she did indeed commit the crime. But he's going to be a sympathetic witness to the defense. I think that we have seen a lot when you have a mother killing their children, that they tend to get convicted by the jury. because people see that crime as, just, a tragedy that they're not willing to let the person go, let's say. But when you have the person who should care the most, right, the father of the children, showing such compassion and a willingness to have that person have clemency, let's say, it makes it a lot more difficult for the jury to punish the mother in a way the father wouldn't. So I think he's going to be a strong witness for the defense, even if
That's a really good point, guys. I did want to bring up that in the background of this case, and I'm thinking back because it's been a while since I've really discussed this case. But if I'm not mistaken, he was working from home, I believe, because of her postpartum depression. She was having trouble daily. And so he wanted to be there, That's why she had sent him out of the house. Okay. That's what the prosecution is saying, and he questioned her. He said he questioned her about that. Why did you send me out because you planned this? I'm not sure how I feel about that. I do kind of think she planned it. Did she just plan it that day? That could possibly be, right? She could possibly have just planned it that day. At some point during that day, something snapped in her. She said she heard voices. Whatever may have happened, I think that she planned it that day, and then that's how she got him out of the house, and so on, so forth. But yes, he was working from home. So then all of a sudden, she's in the hospital. She's paralyzed. The baby was in the hospital for 3 days before he passed away. He has 3 funerals now to prepare for. That's a lot of expenses. That's hence why the GoFundMe was set up. And how much work did he miss in the meantime, right? I mean, this had to have been horrific for this poor guy. I can't imagine what he's going through. So to have a heart, most men, in my opinion, would be angry, right? But he has a heart. He knows that his wife was ill, and he knows that's why she did it. It doesn't mean he thinks it was okay for her to do it, but he knows the reason why she did it, right? I am a little curious as to why. I'm thinking the prosecution looks at him almost as a hostile witness because he does defend Lindsay, right? So maybe that's what their conversations have been like, where he is constantly defending Lindsay and they don't feel they're getting the truth from him or something. I don't know. But there's more behind the scenes that we don't know about there, I think, because he's ready to testify, but see, he's going to be a good witness for the defense. He's not going to be a good witness for the prosecution. The only thing about the prosecution is the fact that he came home, he found her, yes, she sent him out, blah, 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 blah. Just the facts of what happened in the case, right? Such a tragic case, guys. Such a tragic case. I'm glad, since we just got done with the Megan Boswell trial, I am really glad that this case is not going to court until January. I'm sure for his family, even her family, that they would like this to be over. But in my opinion and for my own mental health, I'm glad it's not going to happen until next January.
The prosecution wants him also.
That's what I was thinking. His testimony is really going to be the most important thing in all of it, unless she were to testify, which is way down the line. We could talk about that on a future episode. I did want to talk about her defense, though. She says not guilty by reason of insanity, mental disease, or defect. This we've seen a couple of times on cases we've covered here on Law and Crime. You and I believe, have even talked about it, but it's just good for a refresher to go through. What does all of that mean for the defendant?
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like in Massachusetts, the prosecution has to prove that she did the crime. And even if she was sick or had this mental illness, she was able to appreciate right from wrong and understand her crime. And that is something that, we talk about a lot, how it's very difficult to not be able to understand what you're doing, right? And that's why it's so difficult to get an acquittal by reason of insanity, because somebody could snap or right have this emotional outburst or something, but that's not the same thing as not understanding what they did was wrong. And so that's a difficult defense. It looks like here in Massachusetts, the prosecution is going to have to prove that she still understood what she was doing wrong, despite the fact that she's asserting this defense.
That's something the prosecution has said pretty much since day one, that they believe this was premeditated. She was saying she knew what she was doing. So it does sound like they're going to have to bring a pretty strong argument to prove, again, that she was not insane at the time. I wanted to talk a bit more about the prosecution too, because I believe they got a bit of a win recently. A judge ruled that they were the ones who could choose a mental health expert to evaluate Lindsay Clancy. I'm sure the defense will bring their own experts when it comes time for trial, but recently the judge did say, okay, you guys can pick the mental health expert, take a look at her and see what sort of diagnosis they come up with. Do you think that is a win for the prosecution?
This is going to become the battle of the experts, as we've seen in many cases, whether or not it has to do with mental health or, security systems of some computer that got hacked. It's going to be a matter of which expert is better, the prosecution's expert or the defense's expert. Most likely, the defense one will be saying that she could not appreciate right from wrong, that she was that severe in her mental illness. And most likely, even though we haven't even seen this yet, the prosecution won't say the same thing. And it will come down to who's more credible, who does the jury believe. There's probably going to be some sort of overlap. I can't imagine the prosecution expert saying that she didn't have anything happening to her. And so then it might come to how crucial is that overlap? How much is that overlap? But this is often in any trial. Sometimes it does come down to these battle of the experts.
Going off all of that and talking about medical experts, before all of this, before the killings of these three children, Lindsay had been seen by multiple different psychiatrists or mental health professionals over time. She had actually been admitted to a hospital. And even since all of this, she has been treated in a hospital for her physical injuries, but has continued to receive mental health treatment. What about those doctors who have known her personally one-on-one, seen her over the past several years, and they're the ones who originally diagnosed her or prescribed her? Are those people potentially going to be called and have to speak to their diagnoses of her?
Absolutely. And the ones who had one, if it's going to be helpful, the defense will definitely bring that out to show that this isn't a matter of, this isn't some sort of brand new defense that she's coming up with, but that she was really trying to get help for a long time. And that helps make her one more sympathetic and helps her defense.
I do wonder about all of that, the medical records, and there were also journal entries leading up to all of this that I'm sure the defense is going to highlight. Talking about the case, though, the trial coming up, it's actually a year away from now, January 2026, which is kind of crazy when you think about the fact that this happened back in January of 2023. So 3 years elapsed from the time that this crime happened and then is going to trial. What do you think about that time lapse? Is that helpful for the defense and the prosecution to prep more, or does it hurt because of time passage?
hmm Well, it might help in terms of the witnesses not being as emotional around the situation. The prosecution, wants witnesses to be emotional. It helps kind of convince a jury that they need justice here for the children. So the time could help the prosecution in that situation. And as we know, the defense has a right to a speedy trial. So when you have a delay like this, it's because the defense has, filed various motions that delays that trial. And that's well within their constitutional right. So the defense certainly thought that the time that they needed this extra time. It's not going to be an easy case to defend. They do sound like they have a lot of medical records to go through, and they felt like the time was helpful for them.
This is a case we've covered from day one and will continue to follow into next year when it does finally head to trial. Ahead of that, Dina Sayegdal, thank you so much for coming on with us and walking us through the case.
So there you have it, guys. I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think that she planned this? What do you think about the not guilty by mental insanity plea? So they're saying that at the time that this happened, she had to have not known that it was wrong for her to do this. She had to have been that mentally incapable that she didn't realize it was wrong to take the lives of her children and herself. I don't know. I guess for me, I have to go back and really look at what she said to her husband when he found her, because I think there were some things said. So, because that'd be the first, right? She was found outside on the ground, right? That would be the first, as close as we could get to her mental state at the time that this happened, right? So I guess I'd want to go back there and see what he said that she said. He said, she said, right? So I'm not sure where I stand on that yet. Well, I did feel, and maybe do still feel, that if there is ever a case for not guilty by reason of mental insanity, this would be it, because she had a history. She was trying to get help for her postpartum psychosis, and she really was trying. She was taking all the medications that they told her to take, guys. She was trying. She was going to therapists. She was doing everything that she could do to get better. Okay. So, but if that's part of it, that she has to know, if she knows that what she did was wrong, then she can be found guilty. So, I don't know. I'm not sure what I think right now. I guess that's something I do. I want to go back and look and see what she said to her husband when he found her. Not good at all. Just a really, really sad case. And I feel sorry for Patrick Clancy. I can't imagine what he's been going through, and I admire his loyalty to his wife, throughout all this. It's incredible, unheard of, right? But look at those 2 babies, guys. No longer with us. I do have my grannyism for today. And it talks about a mother's love. There is no perfect way to be a good mother. Each situation is unique. Each mother has different challenges, different skills and abilities, and certainly different children. What matters is that a mother loves her children deeply. Elder M. Russell Ballard said that. So, there's nothing like a mother's love, right? And I don't know how Lindsay could go from this to this. Look at her eyes, guys. There's nothing there, right? Nothing but what I see is grief. So, yeah, I will let you know if anything more comes up with the Lindsay Clancy case. Maybe I'll do another video on when her husband found her, and we can maybe see what we think, right? But in the meantime, please hit the like button on your way out. Hit the subscribe for notifications. Hit the bell. And we will see you. Be sure to get on our lives every night. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching another episode of Granny's Crime Busters. We really appreciate each and every one of you. Don't forget to subscribe and like and even share the content. You can follow us on any of our other social media platforms at YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We really appreciate you guys, and you can also email us at grannyscrimebusters@gmail.com. Thank you so much, and we will see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.